This is Reverse Engineered.
Hey everyone, my name is Jon Penland, and Reverse Engineered is brought to you by Kinsta, a premium managed hosting provider. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Lloyed Lobo, co-founder of Boast.ai and Traction. Lloyd, welcome to Reverse Engineered.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. I am super pumped. I love the guitars on the back of your wall there. I love the background. I, for a second, thought it was a fake background, but
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that because the guitars again are personal touch. I used to play guitar back in high school and college, and the shelves I built myself. So the fact that you thought it was a fake background is a real pat on the back for me. I appreciate that.
it looks very pro.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to hang out with me here on Reverse Engineered. And to get us started, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Definitely. So my name is Lloyed Lobo. I'm the co-founder of a company called Boast.ai and Traction, which is a nonprofit community. So what Boast.ai does is we automate access to government funding for innovators and innovative businesses. Each year, globally, hundreds of billions of dollars are given by governments to fund innovation and R&D. But the application process is cumbersome. It's prone to frustrating audits by the tax authorities. And receiving the money takes a long time because you got to incur a year of R&D expenses, then file it with the government with your taxes, then potentially get audited, and then you get the money. And Boast.ai, we set out to help them get money faster for less time and risk. More money faster for less time and risk. Our bigger vision and mission is enabling innovators to change the world and become successful. Every dollar invested in innovation returns 20 to the universe. From vaccines to robots to clean drinking water is a function of innovation. And so the way we serve that is by enabling innovators to become successful by giving them access to non-dilutive capital, which is money from the government, by getting them more money faster for less time and audit risk in their day. So we can prepare these claims, we can finance them and defend them in audits. So as they're doing their R&D through the year, we collect their data from the technical and financial systems. We figure out what qualifies. We not only apply for it, but we say you don't have to wait for it to get it from the government. We can finance them.
Yeah.
And then Traction is a community of entrepreneurs and innovators that we built as a nonprofit community to help these innovators and entrepreneurs get access to resources like content and advice and connections to become successful, because money isn't everything. Non-dilutive money isn't everything. Your journey as a founder, as an innovator, involves hiring, scaling, getting to product market fit, getting advisors, hiring people, all kinds of challenges. And so we built that community to bring people together so they can share ideas, exchange resources, and propel one another to success. Because ultimately, without innovation, the world doesn't progress.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you are co-founder of two different businesses that tackle issues that founders and entrepreneurs face, but in two different spaces. There's the capital piece over on the Boast.ai side, and there's the community piece over on the Traction side. Is that a reasonable encapsulation of what's going on there?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So thinking about Boast.ai, because I was checking out Boast.ai in preparation for this conversation, I was looking at your website and trying to understand what it is that you're doing there. And who would you say is the target market of Boast.ai? I mean, I know it's entrepreneurs, but is it also a product for small and medium businesses, or is it purely focused on folks who are in kind of that startup mindset?
It's for anyone that's innovating, building technology, new products, new materials, new services, and overcoming challenges. If you've got engineers on staff, whether it's developers or mechanical engineers or tradespeople who are innovating, meaning developing new products, materials, processes, technologies, or improving them, then you can claim for these credits.
Yeah. So are these credits, the fields you specifically mentioned, all immediately screamed physical product to me? Is this primarily physical product focused, or is it also about digital services and products?
It applies to all products and services. It could be vaccines, it could be robots, it could be drinking water, it could be software as a service businesses. Now, the bulk of our customers are in the software space, but we got customers in every sort of landscape, from manufacturing to chemicals to pharma to biotech to agriculture to hardware, but the bulk of our customers end up being software startups.
Yeah. So let me ask you a little bit of a perhaps controversial question here. Is there anybody that is not in the target market for Boast AI in terms of thinking about companies, or the companies that are just not going to be a good fit for what you're doing there at Boast AI?
If a company that is not innovating or not developing new products or technologies or processes or improving on them with their own labor in the US or in Canada, in the countries where these incentives are available, then they don't qualify. So, a perfect example would be you're a startup that has all offshore developers. You
Mm,
can't claim that money. Or you're a startup that just buys software off the shelf and you're installing it,
hmm
or you're making minor settings adjustments to it. If you buy a piece of software and you're saying, hey, I need to extend the software, and there's no instructional manual on how to do it. So now I got to write custom code to help it enable it to do XYZ for me capabilities, then you can claim it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Okay.
on the high end, let's say you're doing an integration with a third party software, and that software doesn't have an open API or connector to you. And maybe it's Walmart, for example. They have a manufacturing line. You need to build software that automates the manufacturing line and ships like the best shipping rates on packages once they're packed. But the system, the ERP system that they have that controls that line does not have an API and it's old software. Now you got to write a custom integration.
hmm
Now people will be like, integrations are straightforward. No, but in that situation, it's very custom.
Right.
And now if you come across that piece of technology anywhere else, you can integrate it without issues because you've done the learning here. So they're paying you to learn new things for doing R&D and innovation, right? On the high end, you could be building AI software that parses through voice, video, text, and provides real-time insight. So for example, have you ever been called into a bank and you get bounced around so much and you're
Oh,
like,
sure.
why can't this figure it out? Right. And so let's say the system recognizes your voice, and even if you're disconnected, it finds the person who's
Mm,
available and gives them the context to reconnect you leveraging AI. So that is complex. And on the low end, it's building an integration. So R&D is a bad word for these incentives because R&D implies you're making something groundbreaking.
hmm
What this money is for is experimentation, research and experimentation, experimental development, meaning developing something new or improving something existing. I came upon a challenge that I couldn't find the answer to in the public domain. I couldn't Google search the answer. There was no open API, there was no playbook. So I had to rinse, lather, and repeat and iterate and apply a bunch of things and keep failing and iterating and failing and trying and iterating to get to the end outcome. And for that time wasted, they're giving you that money. And now the learnings from that time wasted, you can apply to 10 other things.
Yeah. It's funny. You said the example about the bank, and immediately my mind went to a recent situation I had where I was trying desperately to talk to a physical human at a specific credit card company. And yeah, that technology would have been fantastic because I was extremely frustrated with that process. But the thing that occurs to me as I hear you talking about these credits for creating new solutions, and there are some specific pieces there, the United States, the Canada, some locational pieces. But the question that comes to mind, do you think a lot of businesses are leaving money on the table? Are there a lot of businesses that are operating that just don't know about these possibilities? So the question is, Boast AI solving an educational problem, or is it solving a logistical problem where businesses know about it, but it's really hard to do? Or is there also this educational piece where businesses just don't know that this money is out there that they could potentially qualify for?
Yeah, so it serves both, right? So in the
Hmm.
US, I would say like 50% of the companies don't know this exists.
Yeah.
For the companies that know that it exists and that are claiming, it's a cumbersome process because you work with some accountant who comes in at the end of the year and says, tell me what you did in R&D that meets this narrow
Right.
criteria.
Yep.
Then you got to go and dig through all of it. Then you got to
hmm
write documentation, you got to do time tracking, and then you got to fill out all these forms and provide it. And then you file it, and if the government decides to audit you, then you got to sit and explain to the IRS why this work qualifies. And through all that process, from the first dollar you spent till you got it back, it's a long time. And what we're saying is we'll plug into your technical systems, Jira, Git, whatever project management systems you use, your financial and payroll systems. We'll stitch the two systems together and we'll see based on payroll information and whatnot, what are the titles, what projects they're working on,
Hmm.
and automate that process. And because of that automated underwriting, we know how much they qualify for, and we can give them the money now and take
Yeah.
interest later.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I've been not part of, but adjacent to some of those conversations happening internally. How many folks do we have working on this and what are they working on? Does that qualify? So I can speak to some of the challenges there. And yeah, solving that with some smart integration with the tools we're already using, Jira and job titles and whatnot. I could see that really cutting down on the labor involved and increase the likelihood that it's something that a business is going to pursue. Now, I am curious about your role at these companies today. So you founded Boast.ai and Traction, but what's your position within those companies today? What are you doing there day to day?
Definitely. So when we started Boast, we bootstrapped the company to near 8 figures in revenue, and I was doing everything from marketing to product
Hmm.
to launching us. I did our first sales. I launched us in key markets like Silicon Valley or Vancouver or Toronto. We started selling through partnerships. I brought our first partner, channel partner, and we wanted to do telesales and build a sales development team. I ended up being our first
Hmm.
sales development person. I'm a 0 to 1 person, right?
Yeah.
Startups are built in phases. Phase one is what? Validation. You validate something, you get a small subset of people to try it out. Next phase is product market fit. You expand that footprint to maybe 50. And the key metric there is retention. People who
Hmm.
try it don't leave. They love it. They don't just say, I'm going to try it out. Saying I'll try it out means your messaging resonates. You got
Hmm.
message market fit. When people don't leave, it means you have product market fit. The next phase is you figure out product channel fit. You figure out a scalable, repeatable channel to get creep and grow customers. Then comes to a point of scale where, like, hey, I'm going to spend 75% of my resources on putting fuel on the fire and 25% on trying new things.
Hmm.
I love making that journey from validation to product market fit to product channel fit and then scale. I'm not the guy who will optimize things now, say, okay, you know what, we figured this out. Let's put fuel on fire and keep optimizing. I'm not that guy.
Hmm.
And so at Boast, have done every little thing, taken it to product channel fit and handed it off when it's at scale, whether it's channel partner, whether it's new product, whether it's new market. And so I pride myself in doing that. At Traction, I head up the organization and I run it. It's a nonprofit community. We've got 100,000+ subscribers, and we host 2 podcasts a week, 2 live webinars a week, dinners in different cities, and a big annual conference, entirely volunteer run. And so I head up that. I do all the content and the programming, from getting speakers. And if you go to tractionconf.io, you'll see every major CEO or C suite from
Hmm.
every major multi-billion dollar company from Uber to Shopify has been there. And so I do that outreach and content and building relationships. Ultimately, what's fun for me, and I say this often, when passion meets profession, you become Michael Jackson because you're truly doing something you love, right? And you can be really good at it. My superpower is building community and connecting people,
Yeah.
right? And so I really love that, and so I generally gravitate towards community. I've recently stepped on the board at Boast.ai. We brought in a new CEO who
Hmm.
comes from huge background with exits, IPOs, working at large companies, small, seeing that journey from like 10, 15 million to 100 million. And he's been a product and engineering leader. His name is Alok. He was top 25 software and product leader in 2021. And so my transition is full time now, focused on this Traction nonprofit community.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious about the backstory of how you got where you are today. I was looking back at your LinkedIn profile, and it looked to me, if reading between the lines, it looked to me like Boast actually started as some sort of like a capital generation type company, and then eventually grew into what seems today to be more of a SaaS company. And then
Yeah.
Traction seemed to be a bit of a bolt onto that, which is now kind of morphed into its own thing. Can you talk about how all those pieces came together? What was that evolution like?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I, Alex and I, are best friends. He's my daughter's godfather. I'm his daughter's godfather. We went to university together. We've known each other since we were like 19 or 20 or
Hmm.
something, 20 maybe, right? We went to university together. We were partners in every project. And after engineering, he got into Johnson and Johnson's engineering leadership program, built software there. Then he did a startup and failed. And he felt like he failed because he didn't have a handle on accounting and finance. And so he went back to school and learned accounting and finance. And so his unique combination of engineering and accounting got him into the accounting world. And
Hmm.
when he worked at these big four accounting firms, they're like, hey, you have a unique skill set. You're an engineer, but
Mm.
you're also an accountant. You can help us prepare these R&D tax credit claims because you got to write these long reports. After engineering, I went into product at a startup. I only worked at startups. I've never worked at a bigger company. And then I did growth at another startup. And then Alex called me and he's like, man, this whole R&D tax credit space is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We should build something for it to automate and streamline it. And I was having a bad experience in the startup I was working at, where I was leading growth. The CEO was not a very people person. He believed in this concept of what I call hustle porn: work
Mm.
everyone, work, work,
Sure.
work, work, work.
Yeah.
And first time CEOs often are like that. They don't think through work life balance. Everything is go, go, go.
Mm.
And he would say things like, I see everyone as a lemon. I want to squeeze as much as possible. There was an incident
It's
where I used to stay at work till like 9, 10 o'clock. And one day I started going home at 6. And he emails me saying, hey, I used to love it when you're in the office till late. What's causing you to go home early? My wife was a medical ER resident. So your wife is in residency, so she's working 100 hours a week. Why are you going home? And my
mm.
parents were visiting in town. And so that's why I was going. And so Alex, when he called me that day, I just literally cried. And I'm like, I don't care what we build, man. As long as we build a company that we want to work for, I'm in. And so we did. We started Boast as a consulting firm doing R&D tax credits manually. At the same time, we worked on other products too. We worked on a product called Automatically, which was a chatbot built on top of Zendesk, which failed. Money was tight, so I joined the founding team of a company called Speakeasy, which was AI for sales, incubated by Bessemer Ventures. That didn't work out. When that failed, I went back to Alex and I'm like, hey, man, you got Boast running as a consulting firm. And rather than doing other startups, why don't we just turn this into a product company? At least you got like a few dozen customers that are happy
Hmm.
and paying for the service manually. So we know what the outcome is that the customer is looking for. Now let's just streamline the delivery of that outcome by building software. And so that was the journey. So Boast.ai was incorporated in 2017. And before that, it was a consulting firm. And we pivoted and incorporated this Boast.ai. And we've seen incredible growth. We bootstrapped it till 8 figures. And then we raised a $23 million Series A in December 2020. And in parallel, because we had failed founders, we started hosting pizza nights, just like a pay it forward into the community. And every time we'd host this pizza night, more people would show up. And one day, this co-working space had like 200 people, and they're like, "Guys, you
Wow.
can't have 200 people in this co-working space for an event." So we morphed it into a conference. And it's funny, the first conference was not called Traction, but we had another partner helping with us who ran off with all the money from it. And we
Oh
are like,
no.
oh, what a misery. Then we partnered with a nonprofit and spun it into a nonprofit community and called it Traction. And yeah, that's been the journey. And it evolved from doing small events and conferences to now 2 podcasts a week, 2 webinars a week, 2 million views on YouTube, meetups in different cities, which is halted because of COVID. And then now we have the big IRL conference. So it's grown immensely, right? From like
Mm.
tens of people showing up to hundreds to now like 100,000 community members. And that's fun for me. I genuinely enjoy helping other people, and the joy you get from seeing others succeed and connecting them is second to none. And I feel like that's my life's mission, is enabling entrepreneurs to build world-changing companies through capital, content, connections, and community.
Yeah. That combination of yourself, a startup person, somebody who's been in the startup space, with your best friend here who is working for a big four accounting firm and is an engineer, has an engineering background. That's a really unique combination that I think outside of the startup you've built specifically would be kind of a strange combination. Like we got a startup guy and then we got a guy coming from a big four accounting firm. What a strange combination of partners here. I think the best friend element tweaks it a bit, that makes it make a little bit more sense. But then you see what you've done, which is you've provided a service that a lot of people may have outsourced in the past to a big four and said, well, let's specialize and kind of niche down on this, and then let's automate it, right? Let's find a way to build software around it so that a process that used to be cumbersome and manual and require a great deal of expertise can be done much more easily, be accessible to companies that probably couldn't have accessed that level of product in the past. So it's just a really unique combination of skills the two of you brought to the table.
Exactly, right? Like you got to fill each other's gaps. Everyone needs to understand their zone of genius and what they're missing.
Hmm.
Unconventional advice growing up, you often hear, is that learn these things because you're not skilled at it.
Hmm.
And everything I've done successfully is because I elevated the things I'm really good at.
Mm.
If I try to learn, like, let's say I love to play the piano, that's my passion. If I go
Hmm.
and try to learn the guitar, I may be mediocre or maybe good at it, but not the best at it because
Hmm.
that's not my passion. But if I focus on like playing the piano because I am passionate about it, then I'll be great at it. Right. So if you want a shot at being great at something, especially in a startup, do things you are genuinely skilled at, good at, great at, that you're passionate about.
Hmm.
And everything else, learn to fill your gaps, right? Bring people on who are not so great at it.
Yeah, and I think there's an age element in that answer as well. As I think about my own career trajectory, there was a time, and I'm in my late 30s, I'm rapidly approaching that 40 corner, but there was a time in my early 30s where I thought seriously about going back to school to become a developer, or not to school, but to go into like a boot camp or something like that. And I ended up not doing it, and I'm glad I didn't because I knew that with the application of effort, I could become a developer, yes. But was I ever going to become truly an exceptional developer? Probably not. And I don't want to discourage anybody who's making that career change because you can make a good living doing that. And if that's the choice somebody makes, that's great. I think that's great for them. But what I chose to do instead, or actually the opportunities that life presented to me, were to double down on things that I was already good at, which are things like understanding complex relationships and building workflows and policies and communicating between a group of people around those sorts of complex issues. And so that's really what I'm good at. And that's where I've been able to then apply my expertise. And the reward has been much greater. But I think had I had that idea of becoming a developer when I was 17, 18 years old, it may have made sense to do it then, right? Because there was enough of a ramp still in front of me to where it could have made sense to make that transition. But I think there comes a point, especially if you have an established skill set, where, hey, you know what? Maybe you should really just niche down on what you're doing. Maybe you should just focus on the things you're already good at rather than abandoning that and moving to something where you're going to have to start over from scratch.
Exactly, right? Because building a startup or a company or a product is a team sport,
Mm-hmm.
right? For every face of a company that's the evangelist or the rock star, there's 100 other people in that company, or 1,000 or 10. And in the early days, it's a handful of people. It's about learning how to work with each other and fill each other's gaps. That is the most important thing, because together you grow. It doesn't make sense if I want to be the best at everything. I want to be the best at one thing and maybe learn a little bit of everything else so I can get by. But as soon as I find somebody who's better than me in that
Mm-hmm.
thing, I'm going to bring that person in to fill it in, right? I may be great at something. Let's say you're great at writing content and copy. Now, as a founder, you got to bridge the journey to eventually, yes, you're doing everything yourself, to eventually being an executive focusing on strategy. So if you're really, really good at content and you can do it so well to drive infinite amount of traffic, then it's in your best interest that, hey, I know this really well. So I know what good looks like. Let me find somebody who can take this on and train them or coach them to take this load off me so I can focus on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. To stay excited, sometimes you got to keep reinventing your job in the job versus going and finding a new job, right?
Yeah. And it's actually a lot of fun when there's a part of your job that you're okay at and you go out and you bring in somebody who's really good at it. And within, a month, 2 months, you're like, man, this person is doing such a better job. And all of a sudden, the problems in this area that were bottlenecks are resolved. And we're operating at a whole other level in this space because I was able to sort of let go of that. We're going through that right now internally, where we brought in our first truly qualified, experienced IT person. And problems that were problems, 2 or 3 months ago aren't problems anymore because, this person has genuine expertise in this area and has resolved issues that were challenges in the past. And it's just so fun to be able to hand that off and to watch somebody who really knows what they're doing take that thing that I was struggling with and push it so much further than I was able to.
One other thing that it's really important to be as an early stage founder, or when you're taking something to a 0 to 1, is to be a Swiss Army knife. It's very, very important. You can't be perfect at everything, and perfect is the enemy of done. In the early days, you're saying, okay, let's build this in phases, right? Let's validate what is important. You need to get 8, 10 people to say, I'm going to try it out. Then product market fit. You need to have an MVP, expand that a little bit, and you want to make sure people don't leave, so you're constantly getting feedback. And so it's very important, and as an early stage founder, to dip your toes in many things and be that Swiss Army knife. Otherwise, you're trying to hire expertise and it never works out. Every time you add more people, speed gets reduced, decision making gets reduced. So it's important to be the Swiss Army knife. And then as you traverse the phases from like validation to product market fit to product channel fit and scale, you start filling in and bringing people. And so then you go from being the Swiss Army knife to a specialist. You just need to know when to make that journey. If you go from being a Swiss Army knife to a specialist too soon, you'll slow down decision making and speed in your company.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You're absolutely right. Every time you add folks, it does add process and management and conversation and approval process and right, all these other elements that definitely do slow down things a little bit. So, as long as you're doing them effectively, you do speed up things by continuing to be that Swiss Army knife. That makes a lot of sense. So I want to transition a little bit from talking about Boast.ai and Traction into thinking more about what motivates you personally as an entrepreneur. And you've spoken to that a little bit with this transition into Traction. But as you think back, you've been, based on what I could tell from LinkedIn, you've been an entrepreneur for at least a decade or so. What is it that keeps you going as an entrepreneur? Or in other words, what are you trying to accomplish at this point in your career?
I have this fundamental belief in life. If you focus on control, you destroy relationships. If you focus on money, you make short-term decisions. If you want to be happy in life and build something everlasting, you got to focus on impact. And so whatever I'm focused on needs to have big impact. That's why Boast, enabling innovators to change the world, Traction, enabling and empowering innovators to build multi-billion-dollar companies and change the world. So that impact drives me. Ultimately, if you look at the leading indicators of the impact, it's connected to people. People create impact, not the other way around. People build companies, not the other way around. And so I'm deeply passionate about relationships. I think I'm proud to say that anyone I've worked with in the past would come and work with me again. And so for me, I'm greatly driven by people and relationships and community. And that's something that just comes naturally to me. I started with, when passion meets profession, you become Michael Jackson. I want to be the Michael Jackson of community.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Has that always been the case? Like, as you think back to the beginning of your journey as an entrepreneur, was that always your motivation, or have your goals and motivations?
That's always been my case.
Time?
So I often tell people, if you want to know what you really love doing, go and analyze the things that you repeatedly procrastinate on and hit snooze on. And then go and analyze the things that you just do gracefully for hours, and you'll ignore your family and everyone else for it. And for me, it's been like building traction and building community and helping people. And that's always been the case. And it's probably part of that is nurture, because my mom grew up in the slums of India. And anytime I'd go there, she had 10 siblings. And anytime I'd go there, I'd see like more and more people were staying there. Right. And I'd ask them like, hey, you barely have place for your family to stay here. Why do you have these people? And Mumbai is like the New York of India. So people would come over and then give them shelter. And they'd say like, hey, this person may not help you back, but the karma they get because you've been a part of their journey and helping them, giving them shelter, will come back to you in a big way. And obviously none of my mom's siblings, 9 siblings, live in the slums anymore. Everyone's done really well. Wow. And so I've experienced from childhood that joy of giving is second to none. So it's been weaved into, I guess, my bloodline. It's just second nature. And so I draw immense joy from it. it's no fun being at the top of the world and making all the money alone if you have nobody to share it with, right? Ultimately, it's not the money in your bank, but the people around your tombstone that matter.
Mm.
And my second experience around this was, I was a refugee of the Gulf War in Kuwait. My parents were working in Kuwait, not from there. Gulf War hits, I'm like 9 or so, and everyone splits from the country, like the military, everyone, there's like nobody there. And the community came together to evacuate the people, to help evacuate the people by pulling together resources. And how does community start? One person raises their hand and says, I have a problem, looks around,
Mm.
5 other people raise their hand, they gravitated towards it, and they say, let's do something about it. And every apartment building became like a micro community. People would come down. There were no cell phones back then, right?
Hmm.
There were no cell phones, and the phone lines got jammed, and no email and none of that. So people would come down and be like, oh, what's going on? We don't know, there's uncertainty here, we heard this and that. And they would come together to organize resources. And what, they can't text each other, so they'd be like, okay, you know what, we need security for the building, so let's make a plan that you come down at this time, and then I'll go up and relieve you, and I'm going to organize supplies, and I'll organize food and all of this stuff. So the community came together to rescue the people of that country and evacuate them. And I went as a refugee from Kuwait through Baghdad to Jordan, and then got out of there on a plane, stayed in no man's land in the refugee camp, etc. And as we were going on this rickety bus through this highway of death, which is documented heavily,
Hmm.
everyone was being bombed. And I'm looking around the bus to the adults, right? I'm sure they're stressed to the gills, lost all their possessions, currency is invalid, on a road to uncertainty with a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
But, as I looked around the bus, all I could see were people laughing and singing along the way to pump everyone's spirit. And I
Wow.
realized that it's neither the destination nor it's the journey, but the companions that matter the most.
Hmm.
And that's why community is something that I draw immense joy from, because it's been part of my bloodline and my upbringing and nurture. And that's just something I automatically gravitate towards. And a community has helped me from funding the company, to making key hires, to getting early customers, to making lifelong friends in any city I go to. And
Yeah.
so that's what I draw immense joy from.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that line. You said it's not the destination, it's not the journey, it's actually the companions. I love that. I've never heard that before. I think that's kind of a great observation. So you're now at Traction and you're building community there. And that community is a community of entrepreneurs and builders and creators. And I'm sure you hear a lot of stories, right? A lot of stories about folks' entrepreneurial journey. And I'm curious if there are like classic pitfalls or stereotypes that you observe of this community, that if there was somebody else, about to launch on their entrepreneurial journey, you would say, look, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs through this community. Here are some things you really need to avoid or watch out for as you embark on this journey.
Definitely. The first thing is, there's this trope with all the TechCrunch and the Shark's Tank
Mm.
and all these shows, that entrepreneurship is hyped up and everyone thinks they can go and raise venture capital to build their idea. Focus on solving a problem for a customer because you're passionate about it, you have conviction about it. Have conviction about the customer you're serving and the problem you're solving, and let that be your guide, right? Focus on that. First principles of business are more important. Focus on delivering value to the customer, validate it, get it to product market fit, then go and raise money,
Mm.
right? But don't say, I will do this idea if I could raise money. Take the risk. Leave your job, right? Figure out how much money you have in the bank and for how many months. Because pain is the precondition for growth. There's this saying that tough people create good times. Good times create weak people.
Mm.
Weak people create tough times, and tough times create strong people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the cycle there. And so pain is the precondition for growth. It's like
Mm.
bodybuilding. You want to go and grow, you keep increasing the weight, right? And so when you have this cushy job and you're like, oh, I'm going to raise millions and I'm going to hire all these people, and I've been through that journey, it almost very difficult to work out, right? You got to get out there and struggle a little bit.
Mm.
I have this idea. Is this something that people want? I'm going to figure out who is the ideal customer profile. Where do they eat, breathe, drink, sleep? Let me leverage my network and cold call and cold email, and let me find these people and try to understand a day in their life. Have they ever experienced this problem? How are they solving it today? what is working, what is not. If they had a magic wand, how would they solve it? And how much would they pay for it? Like, understand
Mm-hmm.
that. Get them to sign LOIs or agree to try it out. Right? Go through that journey a little bit. Then scrap together some cash, or there's a whole bunch of low code, no code tools to
Mm-hmm.
string together an MVP and present it to them and keep them updated like a Kickstarter campaign and see they'll use it. When you get like 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, then you're like, you know what? I understand the fruits of my labor, right? And then others will respect you more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't value other people's money, they won't value you, right? And so I think it's very important to develop this intrinsic value for the customer and money, right? If raising lots and lots of money tends to enable you to blow up more money, and you lose sight of this reality that ultimately you're here to build a business, right? Customer value, employee value, growing that over time, right? And another thing is, a lot of people ask me, oh, tell me what's the next growth hack? What growth hack can I do to grow my business? It's not about growth hacks, it's about first principles, right? You're not ready to grow if you don't have two things: an ideal customer profile, meaning I'm going to try you. One kind of person comes and tells you, I want to try this out. And the second thing is, you don't have retention. Every time they have this problem, they keep coming back. Idea ICP with a problem that wants to try you out, and anytime they experience that problem, they keep trying you out.
Mm.
You can build a pretty big business, maybe 10, 15, 20 million revenue, by selling one kind of product to one kind of customer coming
Mm-hmm.
through one kind of channel. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs, what they do is, what's the next growth hack? What's the next shiny object? Let's chase these three different channels. Somebody tells me I'm not on HubSpot, so you know what, I should launch a marketing automation system. Or somebody says I need to be on Twitter and TikTok and this thing called Clubhouse. What is that? Like, to chase it. But what you tell people is, where are all your customers coming from? Like, figure out your ideal customer profile. Who do they fund? Meaning, what tools they pay for? Who do they follow? Who are the influencers? And who do they frequent? What events they go to? What magazines, blogs they read? And try to dominate the sphere around there, right? Just add value there. And if a channel is working, squeeze the most out of it. Don't try to add new things until you've figured it out, right? So nail it and then scale it. And I think lack of focus is what destroys a lot of early stage founders.
Hmm.
Somebody may come and tell you you're not on TikTok or you're not on Instagram, and you're like, I don't care, because we have an SDR team that cold calls customers, and for every 100 calls they make, we get 10 demos and we close 2 clients, and we're just going to ramp that up for now, because in this phase what matters is I get to product channel fit, and then I can put fuel on the fire and take some money, right?
Yeah.
If you can't prove the ROI something, and you go and try the next thing and the next thing and next thing, you're distracting, right? And then the last framework I say is, like, you have infinite number of ideas as a founder. Infinite number of ideas. Oh, I'm going to try this tactic or that product feature. Prioritization is key. And how do you prioritize? What is the way to prioritize? And the way I look at it is, there's this very known framework called RICE, right? Reach, impact, confidence, and ease, or effort. What it's saying is, how many people is this going to get to? What is the total addressable market? What is the impact it's going to have on the business and the customer? What is my confidence that it's going to do that? And what is the effort?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to ultimately go for high impact, low effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just something that's low effort, because you could do a lot of low effort stuff, like put a button on there. But what's going to be the highest impact and lowest effort? So that's how you prioritize. And so the three frameworks that I've developed for myself from learning is, obviously I didn't invent these frameworks, from observing and learning from smart leaders, is 3 valuable frameworks. One is that whole phase of startups built in phases: validation, product market fit, product channel fit, scale. This RICE framework of prioritization.
It's interesting to hear that answer, though, because I have 2 thoughts. One, I feel like you have the outline of a book right there. But then the second is that as you're giving those answers, I'm sitting here nodding along, because I can see the things that you're saying tracking to the growth I've seen at Kinsta over time, right? You talk about finding that single focus, know how you're going to market, right? And like, for years, Kinsta was content marketing, because when they started, they didn't have any money. And it was like, well, we can publish content, that we can do, and we can do SEO. And that's what they did for the first 5 or 6 years. It was like content, SEO, that was their go-to-market strategy. Have a contact form on the website, people can sign up, right? And it worked. And then they really did focus in on, we know who our customer is. All right, it's very specific. It has to do with WordPress. It has to do with performance. It has to do with service. These are sort of the pillars of what we're offering and what our customers are looking for. That's all that Kinsta did, right? It was very, very highly focused. So yeah, it's interesting to hear as you talk about those different elements, because I feel like every one of them, I've seen those validated in my own personal professional experience. And I do feel like you have the outline of a future book right there. So.
Yeah, I am working on a book on community-led growth coming out in October, November. So it'll be on the
Awesome.
Traction Conf website. So
Yep.
just to repeat, like the three valuable frameworks that have been super helpful to me as a founder. One is startups are built in phases. Validation, get 5, 10 people to try it out. And there the metric is, will they try it out? 2 is product market fit, where you expand that to maybe 40, 50 people. And the key metric there is retention. They keep coming back. Third is product channel fit. You figure out a repeatable, scalable channel to keep customers, keep and grow customers, or acquire customers. So that could be sales, that could be events, that could be content. And the fourth one is scale, where you spend 75% of your energy putting fuel on the fire and 25% trying new things, but still going through that cycle of validate, product market fit, product channel fit, and scale. So that is one framework. The second framework is 1-1-1 focus. One kind of customer coming through one kind of channel, getting one kind of value. And to do that, you need to look at your ICP and put it in the center and say, who do they fund? Who do they follow? Who do they frequent? And this is what we used for Boast, right? When we were building Traction, we got the founder. They pay for tools like Stripe and MongoDB and Intercom and whatnot. And who do they frequent? They go to events, right? Community events, and they read blogs like TechCrunch and whatnot. And who do they follow? All these VCs and entrepreneurs who are 10x more valued than them, like the multi-billion-dollar companies. So when we started doing events, we started inviting CEOs and founders of these multi-billion-dollar companies and VCs, and we started inviting TechCrunch reporters and whatnot because they read that, and then would invite all these vendors who they buy tools from as sponsors. So when you go in the room, they're like, "Oh, these are all my people, right? I'm surrounded the people I know. I pay for these tools, and wow, I use this MongoDB and Stripe, and wow, I love this founder, like Twilio. I'm a big fan, and these VCs, wow, we're chasing them. I wish they wrote a check in me." To like, whoa, this is the reporter from TechCrunch. Like, I would love to be featured in Tech. So that framework, do it for your market, because when you then target those people and they start coming to your events and get involved with you and we're doing outreach, it makes it very easy, because then they feel like they're doing business with people they know.
Yeah.
Right. And so that fund, follow, frequent 1-1-1 is important. And then in terms of channel prioritization, the how many people it's going to reach, what is the impact it's going to have, what is my confidence, and what is the ease is very important, right? You don't ever do a tactic if you don't know how many people it's going to reach, and then how it's going to reach them. And that'll help you prioritize. And those three frameworks are like gold.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And I really do think you have the outline there for a book, or at least a really solid blog post or something like that could be really useful to folks, knowing those 3 different frameworks to kind of bring to bear on their entrepreneurial ventures. I mean, I really think businesses, just really in any kind of a growth phase, there's some really good principles there to take away. So as we come to a close, most of our listeners are small business owners or contributing in some fashion to entrepreneurial companies. Is there a resource? It could be a book, a newsletter, a blog, really anything that you would recommend to our listeners that you think would be particularly useful to them?
Yeah, definitely. So one, I would read this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. My favorite book. I don't read books otherwise. Very rare, far and few in between. I'm going to open my Kindle to see what's at the top, because I don't read very well.
Sure.
That's the issue. And so that's why I interview 3 to 4 smart people every week at Traction, because I'm not a good reader. Read Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman.
Okay.
Because that will help you really understand how to build from stories from other people, right? I think that is really, really important. There's this book called High Growth Handbook by Elad Gil. Read that. I think those are 3 fundamental great books. So Masters of Scale, High Growth Handbook, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's a new book by Frank Slootman, who's the founder of Snowflake. It's called Amp It Up. So read
Mhm.
that. So those are 4 things. And the rest is I just read blogs, man. Just search
Mhm.
the topic that you're looking for and search for it on YouTube and Google and read the top viewed ranked ones, watch the top viewed ranked ones. I'm a big believer in just in time information. Sometimes you read a
Sure.
book and you can't apply it. It's good
Sure.
knowledge. And especially if that material is dry, like a text, then it's not even fun, right? Like Masters of Scale, I
Right.
loved because it's like stories, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're looking for information, just search for it via blog post. Don't feel like this need that, I'm such a loser. Everyone, like all the top CEOs, they read like hundreds of books a year. Like, who cares? You consume information how you consume it. And if that's
Mhm.
watching YouTube or listening to an audio book or reading a blog post, that's fine. Or that's finding 2 people a week and interviewing them on your podcast by asking them smart questions. Do that. So there is no compensation for execution. Everything else is theory, right? Theory doesn't compensate the learnings you would get from execution. And so if it's business related, research situations
Mm.
that you're in and read all about them. Step further, find out people who've gone through those situations successfully and cold email them and ask them if they would be willing to share some advice. Those 2 pieces of things, like just in time advice via researching and reading and talking to others who would
Yeah.
mentor you through that, you, is immense learning. And also now you've overcome your fear of outreach and you can
Yeah.
outreach to anyone,
I
which
love
is a
it.
great
So,
skill to have.
yeah, I love it. So a couple of book recommendations, but the real recommendation there being focus on just in time consumption of information. Find the information you need right now, go read it. It'll be more applicable. You'll actually bring it to bear and then talk to people who've been there. I love that. Last question for you, Lloyd.
Definitely.
Where can people connect with you or learn more about Boast.ai and Traction?
For the last 5 weeks, I haven't been active on LinkedIn because I took time off to spend time
Mhm.
with my family, and that disconnection is really important. It makes you more connected at home. Otherwise, you have this like social FOMO. I'm on LinkedIn, Lloyed, last name Lobo, or go to tractionconf.io, tractionconf.io, or boast.ai.
Okay, awesome. Well, Lloyd, it's been fantastic to have you on Reverse Engineer. Thank you for hanging out with me for an hour today.
Sounds great. Thank
All right.
you for having me, John. It was fantastic. I enjoyed the conversation. It was like I wasn't sure how I should keep my energy, like super pumped. Like sometimes I am, like
Mhm.
it's a show or like conversation. So this was a conversation. I quite enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
All right, awesome. Well, Lloyd, again, thank you. I appreciate all your time here. Thank you to our listeners. That's all for today's podcast. You can access the episode show notes at kinsta.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Reverse Engineered and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform you're listening on right now. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Reverse Engineered, the podcast on all things business and tech. Reverse Engineered is brought to you by Kinsta. Kinsta's premium WordPress hosting can speed up your website by up to 200%. And you'll get 24/7 support from our expert WordPress engineers. Let us show you the Kinsta difference at kinsta.com.